My GF told me, if you really loved me, you'd help pay off my student loans. I answered, let's take a closer look at the paperwork. Then I brought in a forensic accountant. The loans turned out to be payments for her ex-boyfriend's car, and what I did after that made her regret everything. I'm Adrian, 33, and I work as a civil engineer for a regional infrastructure firm. My days are mostly project schedules, structural reports, and site inspections. I'm the kind of person who likes systems that make sense, clear inputs, predictable outputs. My girlfriend, Bianca, is 29 and works as an event coordinator for a boutique hospitality company. We'd been together a little over 2 years and living in the same apartment for about 8 months. At the beginning, our personalities felt complementary. I was organized and steady. She was social, spontaneous, and always surrounded by people. But there was one topic that slowly became a recurring theme in our relationship: money. Bianca had a large amount of student debt. That alone never bothered me. Plenty of people our age carry loans. What started bothering me was how the conversation around it kept evolving. At first, it was just venting. She'd drop onto the couch after work, open her banking app, and start narrating the numbers like they were a personal crisis. I'm never getting out of this hole. I'd usually respond the way engineers do. I'd ask practical questions. What's the interest rate? Is it federal or private? Have you looked into refinancing? Those kinds of questions irritated her almost immediately. She didn't want solutions. She wanted validation. A few months ago, the tone of those conversations changed. Instead of focusing on the loans themselves, she started bringing up what other people's boyfriends were doing. My friend Natalie's boyfriend helped her wipe out 15,000 of her loans last year. Another time she said something similar, but more pointed. If you really love someone, you help them get out of debt. I remember glancing up from a project document and answering calmly. Helping is different from taking over. She rolled her eyes and called me emotionally detached. After that, the topic came up more often. Eventually, one night at dinner, she said it outright. If you really loved me, you'd help pay off my student loans. She said it like it was obvious, like it was the logical next step in a serious relationship. I didn't argue. Instead, I said something that made her smile immediately. All right, let's take a closer look at the paperwork. What Bianca didn't know was that I spend my career reviewing numbers and documents that are supposed to tell a clear story. And her story about those loans already had a few small inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me curious. Over the next couple of days, Bianca suddenly became very cooperative. Normally, when I asked questions about finances, she'd get defensive or dismissive. But after I agreed to review the paperwork, she switched into a completely different mode. Helpful, enthusiastic, almost relieved. She sent me screenshots first, then PDFs from her loan portal. A few statements she said she had downloaded from the servicer months ago. The total amount she claimed she owed was about $72,000. Not impossible. Plenty of people graduate with that kind of number. But something about the documents felt off the moment I started reading them. The formatting was inconsistent. The payment descriptions were strangely vague, and the interest structure didn't match what I normally see on federal or private student loans. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I asked her a few neutral questions. When did you consolidate these? Which servicer holds the main balance? She waved a hand casually. It's complicated. They moved between companies a couple times. That answer didn't bother her at all. But it bothered me. Loan transfers happen, sure, but the paperwork usually shows a clear chain. Dates, account numbers, servicing changes. Hers didn't. 2 nights later, she brought the subject up again while we were watching TV. So, after you look at everything, you think you could help me knock some of it down? She said it lightly, but her eyes stayed on me the entire time. I kept my voice neutral. Possibly. But before anyone starts writing checks, I want to understand the full structure of the debt. She groaned dramatically. You engineers make everything sound like a bridge inspection. Maybe. But bridges collapse when people ignore small structural problems. That line made her roll her eyes again. A few minutes later, she went to take a shower and left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. The loan files were still on the screen. That was when I noticed the first detail that didn't just feel strange. It felt wrong. One of the recurring payments wasn't labeled tuition or loan servicing. It was labeled something else entirely. Auto finance payment. And it wasn't a small number. It was almost $800 a month. That's when I stopped assuming Bianca was simply bad with money and started wondering if I was looking at something else entirely. Something she definitely didn't intend for me to notice. I didn't confront Bianca about the payment right away. Instead, I kept reading. There were 6 monthly payments listed in the document history. Same amount every month. Same description. Auto finance payment. $812. That number didn't line up with anything related to student debt. Student loan payments fluctuate depending on the plan. Income-based payments can change. Interest capitalization shifts the totals. Car payments stay the same. I closed the laptop before she came back from the shower. When Bianca returned, she dropped onto the couch next to me like nothing was unusual. So, financial expert, what's the verdict? I shrugged casually, still reviewing things. She sighed loudly like the process itself was personally exhausting for her. I just hate feeling like this debt is hanging over my head forever. I nodded but didn't say much else. Because at that point, I wasn't interested in her explanation anymore. I was interested in the numbers. The next morning, I did something Bianca definitely didn't expect. I called a friend of mine named Lucas. Lucas and I had known each other since college. He started in accounting before moving into forensic financial analysis. His entire job revolved around untangling messy financial situations and figuring out where money was actually going. When I explained what I had noticed, he was quiet for a second. Then he laughed. Auto finance under student debt paperwork? That's creative. I told him I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was just bad labeling. Maybe it was some weird consolidation service. Lucas asked me one question. Do you want to know the truth, or do you want reassurance? The answer to that was easy. Truth. He told me to send everything I had. Statements, screenshots, payment history, account details. Within an hour, I forwarded the files Bianca had given me. Lucas called back later that evening. His tone was very different from the casual one earlier. Yeah, so this isn't student debt. I leaned back in my chair. What is it then? He paused for a second. It looks like a vehicle loan. And based on the lender information, it's not even in Bianca's name. That was the moment the entire situation stopped being confusing and started becoming very interesting. Because there was exactly one person Bianca had mentioned repeatedly over the past 2 years who loved expensive cars. Her ex-boyfriend, Ethan. And suddenly those $800 payments made a lot more sense. I didn't react immediately when Lucas said the loan wasn't Bianca's. Instead, I asked the kind of questions engineers and accountants both ask when something doesn't line up. How sure are you? Lucas didn't hesitate. Very. He explained it step by step. The lender listed on the statement was a regional auto finance company. They don't issue education loans. The payment structure matched a standard 5-year vehicle loan. Fixed monthly payment. Standard interest rate. Standard amortization schedule. Everything about it screamed car loan. Then he said something that made the situation even stranger. The borrower listed on the internal ledger isn't Bianca. It's someone named Ethan Carter. I stared at my kitchen wall for a moment after hearing that. Ethan, Bianca's ex. The one she used to mention constantly when we first started dating. The one who apparently loved sports cars, hated responsibility, and according to her version of events, had been a complete disaster of a boyfriend. Over the last year, she had stopped talking about him almost entirely. I assumed that meant the past had finally stayed in the past. Apparently not. Lucas kept going. From what I can see, Bianca isn't the borrower. She's listed as a secondary payment source. What does that mean exactly? It means the lender doesn't expect her to pay, but they accept payments from her account, which she clearly has been doing. Every month. $812. For almost a year. I thanked Lucas and told him I might need a more formal review. He laughed quietly. You're thinking forensic report. I am. You planning to confront her? Eventually. But not before I understand everything. Lucas agreed immediately. Smart move. Because people who hide money rarely hide just one thing. That conversation ended around 9 that night. Bianca came home about 20 minutes later carrying takeout and talking loudly about some stressful event planning client. I listened, nodded, played the role of normal boyfriend. Meanwhile, my brain was doing a completely different calculation. If she had been paying Ethan's car loan for a year, that meant roughly $10,000 had already gone somewhere she claimed was student debt. $10,000. And she wanted me to start helping with the payments. The next morning, I texted Lucas. Let's do the full forensic review. His response came back 30 seconds later. Perfect. I was hoping you'd say that. Because the more I looked at those documents last night, the more interesting they became. Lucas moved quickly once I told him to run a full review. By the next evening, he had already pulled together a preliminary breakdown of the payments Bianca had shown me. He called while I was still at work. So here's the short version. Your girlfriend's student loans exist, but they're not what she told you. I leaned back in my chair. Meaning she does have some student debt. About $18,000 left. Not 72. That alone was enough to make me pause. She had exaggerated the number by more than 50,000. Lucas kept going. Now here's the interesting part. He explained that the documents Bianca sent me were real statements mixed together with unrelated payment records. Someone had basically assembled a package that made it look like one large debt stream. But the payments themselves told the real story. There were 3 different categories. First was the actual student loan. That one was small, around $200 a month. Second was the auto loan. Ethan Carter, 2-door performance coupe, 4-year loan, $812 every month. And the third category surprised even Lucas. Credit card transfers. Large ones. 500 here, 900 there, sometimes more. Sent to the same person. Ethan again. I rubbed my forehead. So she's been sending him money directly. Yeah. Lucas paused for a second. Based on the payment trail, it looks like she's been financially supporting him for at least 11 months. I did the math quickly. Between the car payments and the transfers, she had sent Ethan somewhere around $20,000 in less than a year. Money she told me was student loan debt. Money she wanted me to help pay. Lucas finally asked the obvious question. Do you think she's still involved with him? I thought about the last year of our relationship. The random nights she said she was out with coworkers. The sudden requests for financial sympathy. The way she kept pushing the topic of me helping with her loans. I answered honestly. I don't know. Lucas didn't push further. But he did say one thing before we hung up. If she's lying about the debt this aggressively, you should assume there's more you haven't seen yet. That night Bianca came home in a surprisingly cheerful mood. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders while I was sitting at the kitchen table. So, have you figured out how we're going to tackle my loans yet? I turned in my chair and looked at her calmly. Not yet, but I'm getting very close. And technically that was true, because Lucas was finishing something much more detailed. A full forensic financial report. One that explained exactly where every dollar had gone. And more importantly, who it was really paying for. Lucas sent the finished report 2 days later. 34 pages. Charts, payment timelines, lender confirmations, transaction logs. The kind of document companies usually commission when they suspect internal fraud. I read the entire thing twice. The conclusion was very clear. Bianca had built a narrative around her student loans that combined 3 completely different financial obligations. A small real loan, a car loan belonging to Ethan, and direct money transfers to Ethan's personal accounts. All of it packaged together so it looked like one large debt burden. The total amount she had sent him over 11 months was just under $23,000. And if she continued at the same pace, the car loan alone would run for another 3 years. Which explained something else. Why she had been so aggressive about getting me involved financially. She wasn't trying to eliminate her debt. She was trying to recruit a second payer. That night Bianca brought the subject up again. We were sitting at the dining table eating takeout. So, financial review done yet? She said it casually, but I could hear the expectation behind it. I wiped my hands and looked at her. Almost. Her eyes lit up. And I leaned back in the chair. I had a professional review done. Her smile faded slightly. Professional? Yeah. Forensic accountant. That word landed like a small stone in still water. The reaction was immediate. Why would you do that? Her voice jumped half an octave higher. Because the numbers didn't make sense. Bianca stared at me for a long second. Then she forced a laugh. You're being dramatic. Maybe. I slid my laptop across the table and opened the first page of Lucas's report. Or maybe I'm being thorough. She glanced down at the screen. At first, she looked confused. Then her eyes moved to the section listing the auto loan. Her entire posture changed. Where did you get this? I kept my voice calm. From the payment history you gave me. That's not possible. It is. I tapped the line with Ethan's name. That's his car loan, Bianca. The silence that followed lasted about 10 seconds. Then she did something interesting. She didn't deny it. She got angry. You had no right to dig through my finances like that. And that reaction told me something important. She wasn't upset because the report was wrong. She was upset because it was accurate. Bianca stood up from the table, so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. Her reaction wasn't confusion anymore. It was pure anger. You seriously hired someone to investigate me? I stayed seated. I asked a friend to review financial documents you gave me. That's not the same thing. She paced across the living room, arms folded tightly. This is insane. It's controlling. Who does that? People who are being asked to help pay $70,000. That stopped her for a moment. She turned back toward the table. I never asked you to investigate my entire life. You asked me to help pay your debt, and the numbers didn't add up. She opened her mouth to argue again, but I raised a hand slightly. Let's skip the performance for a second. Her eyes narrowed. What performance? The part where you pretend this is about privacy instead of the fact that you've been paying your ex-boyfriend's car loan for almost a year. The room went completely quiet. Bianca stared at me like she was trying to calculate how much I actually knew. Finally, she spoke. It's not what you think. That sentence alone told me everything. Because innocent explanations usually start with details. Hers started with damage control. I gestured to the laptop. According to the report you've sent Ethan, about $23,000. Her jaw tightened. He needed help. I couldn't help laughing at that. He needed help paying for a performance coupe? She didn't answer. Instead, she switched tactics again. You wouldn't understand. Try me. She crossed her arms again. He got into financial trouble after we broke up. The car was technically in his name, but the payments were falling behind and his credit was getting destroyed. And that's your responsibility? She hesitated. Not responsibility, exactly. Just temporary support. Temporary. 11 months and counting. Her eyes flicked away from mine for a second. Then she said something that actually impressed me. Because it showed just how confident she had been in her plan. That's why I thought you helping with the loans would make things easier. I blinked once. You were planning to use my money to keep paying your ex-boyfriend's car loan. When I said it out loud, the sentence sounded even more ridiculous. But Bianca didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed that I wasn't cooperating. You make good money, Adrian. This wouldn't even affect you. That was the exact moment something in my brain clicked firmly into place. Because the issue wasn't just the money. It was the assumption behind what she had just said. She genuinely believed I should help fund another man's lifestyle. And she thought the only mistake she made was getting caught. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Bianca was standing across the table with her arms crossed, watching me like she expected the conversation to swing back in her favor somehow. Finally, she said it. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I closed the laptop slowly. Am I? Yes. It's just money. People help their partners all the time. I tilted my head slightly. Ethan isn't your partner. She didn't answer that directly. He was important to me for a long time. Past tense, I asked. She hesitated again, which was answer enough. Then she shifted into a different tone. Softer. More persuasive. Look, you're acting like I was trying to scam you or something. You were. Her eyebrows shot up. No, I wasn't. You inflated your student debt by $50,000 and asked me to help pay it. That's not inflation. It's just complicated finances. I almost laughed again. Bianca, you packaged your ex-boyfriend's car payment and personal transfers into a fake student loan narrative. She sighed loudly like I was the difficult one. You're looking at this way too technically. Of course I am. I'm an engineer. Numbers are literally my thing. That seemed to irritate her even more. Then she tried one last angle. You said you loved me. Helping someone you love is normal. Helping someone isn't the problem. Helping someone lie is. That sentence finally landed. Her expression hardened immediately. So what? You're just going to throw away a 2-year relationship over this? I leaned back in the chair and thought about that for a second. Because technically she was right. 2 years is a long time. 2 years of dinners, trips, holidays, meeting families, building routines. But I also thought about the last few weeks. About how confidently she had asked me to start writing checks. About how calm she was while explaining that paying another man's car loan shouldn't bother me. And about the fact that she had never apologized once during the entire conversation. Justifications, excuses, anger, but no apology. So I stood up. Yeah. Her eyes widened slightly. You're serious? Completely. She shook her head in disbelief. You're going to regret this. I grabbed my keys from the counter. Maybe, but I definitely would have regretted paying for Ethan's sports car. That line hit harder than anything else I'd said. Her face went red instantly. And as I walked toward the door, she shouted something after me. You're being selfish, Adrian. I paused for a second at the doorway. Then I looked back at her. No, I'm being expensive. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just left the apartment and drove for a while. When people imagine the end of a relationship, they usually picture something dramatic. Arguments, tears, big emotional speeches. But honestly, the moment everything ended for me had already happened earlier. It was when Bianca said it wouldn't even affect me financially. That sentence stuck in my head the entire drive. Because it perfectly summarized how she viewed the situation. Not as deception, not as betrayal, just as resource allocation. My resources. About an hour later, I parked near a small park a few blocks from the apartment and called Lucas. How'd the conversation go? Exactly how you'd expect. He laughed quietly. So over? Yeah. Clean break? Pretty much. Lucas paused for a second. Good. I frowned slightly. That sounded very confident. Why? Because when I finished the report, I kept digging a little deeper. Of course he did. Lucas had the professional curiosity of a bloodhound. And, well, remember those credit transfers to Ethan? Yeah. There are messages attached to some of them. My stomach tightened slightly. Messages? Payment notes. Sometimes people leave little comments when sending money. What kind of comments? Lucas read one aloud. For the insurance this month. Another one. Don't stress about it. I've got you. And then the last one he found. Miss you. That was the moment the final piece of the puzzle settled into place. So they're still involved. Lucas didn't answer directly, but it definitely doesn't look like a purely financial arrangement. I thanked him for everything and hung up. Then I sat there for a few minutes thinking about the past year. The late work nights. The vague explanations. The sudden urgency about her loans. All of it made sense now. Eventually, I drove back to the apartment. Bianca's car was gone. Inside the place was quiet. Her suitcase was missing from the bedroom. She had clearly left for the night, which honestly made things easier, because it meant I could do the practical part of ending a relationship. I packed my things. Not everything. Just the things that were mine. Laptop, clothes, documents, and the forensic report. Because something told me Bianca wasn't finished with this situation yet. People who lie that confidently rarely accept consequences quietly. And sure enough, my phone started ringing the next morning. The first call came at 8:12 in the morning. Bianca. I let it ring. Then another call. And another. By the time I finished my coffee, she had tried 6 times. Finally, a text came through. Adrian, we need to talk. I waited a few minutes before responding. There's nothing left to talk about. Her reply came almost immediately. You're overreacting, and you know it. I stared at the message for a second. Not because it surprised me. Because it didn't. People who lie that comfortably usually don't suddenly switch to accountability. The next message arrived 30 seconds later. You humiliated me. Do you have any idea how crazy you look hiring someone to investigate your girlfriend? That part actually made me laugh. Because from her perspective, the biggest problem wasn't the deception. It was the exposure. I typed one final response. You asked me to help pay your debt. I checked the numbers. The numbers told the truth. She didn't reply right away. Instead, the phone rang again. I answered this time. Her voice came through sharp and angry. You destroyed our relationship over something that had nothing to do with you. I leaned back in my chair. You tried to make it my responsibility. That's literally what this entire conversation was about. You could have just helped me. Helped you do what? There was a pause. Then she said it again like it should have been obvious. Move forward. That was the last piece of confirmation I needed. Because even now she still wasn't talking about honesty. Just convenience. So I ended the conversation the same way I ended the relationship. Calmly. Bianca, if Ethan needs help paying for his car, he should ask Ethan. Then I hung up. She called twice more that day. I didn't answer. A week later, a mutual friend mentioned she was furious with me. Apparently, she had told people I invaded her privacy and blew up a good relationship over money. Maybe that's the version she needed. For me, the situation was much simpler. Someone asked me to invest in their future. So I checked the paperwork. And it turned out, I was about to finance someone else's past.